You pour that right over your herbs and you let those herbs sit, and those herbs just give off all of their good flavors right on into that vinegar. And it makes for an incredibly safe and incredibly delicious way to get that fresh herb flavor into your winter salads. Hey, you guys, welcome to this week's edition of the Pantry Chat Food for Thought. This week, I'm all by myself. It's one of those weeks where everybody's busy. There's a lot going on because it is harvest season. But, one of the questions that harvest season brings up is how do we preserve every single one of these different foods that we're bringing in from the garden or from the farmer's market? And how do we keep them throughout winter? Not only that, but how do we do it safely? You've worked really hard to grow all these foods or maybe to source really good quality foods. And then you start thinking about winter time and preserving some of these foods. The last thing you want is to worry about safety or to go to use those foods that you've so carefully put up all summer long and then think, I wonder if this is even safe. Is this okay for my family to eat? I have done that in my early homesteading career. I actually had that experience often where I didn't really know the science behind home food preservation. And that left me feeling pretty nervous about the food that I was preserving. So if you're feeling any sense of nervousness, if you're not sure, then you really, really want to get the good scoop on safe home food preservation. And one of those topics is preserving herbs in oil and preserving herbs in vinegar. So today we're going to be talking about both of those things because there are some things that you really need to know in order to not only preserve your food well and to make sure you have great quality, delicious food, but also to make sure that that food is safe. This is one of those areas where you could be creating health problems for your family if you don't know what you're doing. So, we're going to be talking about the safety of it and how to have great home preserved herbs in oil and vinegar, but do it the safe way. All right. First, a little bit of chit chat. Chit chat always feels a little awkward to me when I don't have Josh sitting here or somebody else that I am interviewing. But there's a lot going on in the homestead right now that I'd love to fill you in on. First of all, it is serious harvest season. Like, we are into the baskets and bowls and everything else of food all over the kitchen. Everything feels like it's coming in all at once. We have herbs, we have tomatoes, we have corn, we have green beans, and it's all just kind of flooding our North Idaho kitchen here. This is the stuff dreams are made of. I love, love, love looking around my kitchen counters and just seeing all this incredibly fresh produce that we get to eat. It also creates a little bit of a scramble. It creates a little bit of tension trying to get through it all before the freeze comes. Now, we have several weeks, but here in North Idaho, our growing season is really short. So we don't have as long as we would like to have. Here, we're still in August. Um, you know, there's a lot of good things happening. But before I know it, we're going to be at mid September and we're going to be expecting our first frosts. And then our first freeze will come right behind that. So we're working our way. We're working. We're getting it done. And, it makes for a lot of happy moments. It also makes for moments that we just have to remember to count our blessings and see all the good things first before we take stock of the big to-do list, right? Because there can be a big to-do list this time of year. One of the things that I find really helpful is finding ways to preserve the food that are less stressful. They're not as difficult. They don't require tons of steps and lots of, hours spent in the kitchen. And The herbal oils and vinegars that we're gonna talk about today is one of those methods. It's super fast, it's super easy, and something that I really, really recommend that people do. I also love fermenting. I love fermented foods because I can do a ton of foods really quickly when it's in a ferment. Root cellaring is another method that I really, really like for things like carrots, potatoes, onions, parsnips, beets, all of those types of things can definitely be root cellared, even if you don't have a root cellar, which we don't. We don't have a root cellar. We have a not cold basement, and there's actually a heat source down in the basement, so it can get quite warm down here. But still, we can make roots last all the way until next June. So those are some of my favorite methods. So we're really focusing on those. I also love freeze drying. Of course, I wrote the book on freeze drying the harvest. If you haven't seen that and you're interested in freeze drying, it's just such an amazing method because you can do so much food so quickly and it puts it in a just incredible state. It just stays on your shelf with such good flavor and such high levels of nutrition. So it's definitely a method that I'm really loving. I am still canning things, but I find that I'm doing a lot less of it year after year. Same thing with dehydrating. I love dehydrating. It's a great method, but I find that I'm not doing as much as I used to, as I find these methods that are really a lot faster and more practical. Question of the day. On the video, how we manage a garden with 11 kids, White Pine Homestead asked, how do you store all the winter squash for animal feed? Do you allow stacking them, even though that's not recommended? Oh, absolutely. To be able to store that much winter squash, you really have to be able to stack them. So let's talk about that for just a second because you don't want to stack your winter squash while it's curing. Curing is that time right after you cut it off the vine where you're allowing the skin to thicken. If you have a long enough growing season, you can probably do that right in the field and just cut it off the vine and then go ahead and let it sit there with good air movement, some mild sunshine is fine as long as it's not too wet where it's going to start rotting. That's going to allow those skins to harden up, to thicken, and to get to where you can definitely stack them later. That's kind of the trick. Make sure they're well cured. Then you can stack them off in a corner of the barn, somewhere where they're not going to freeze. And then you'll be able to toss them out to the animals all winter long as you have them. So, what a great way to augment your animals and your livestock feed. It's just such a good, healthy way to do that and to be able to grow some more food right on your property. Okay, before we jump into the topic of the day, we really need to thank our sponsor. Our sponsor today is ForJars. Now, you know that we do a lot of food preservation here on this property. We're feeding a lot of times about 15 people per meal right here off the homestead. So we are preserving a lot of food for winter and we're using it all winter long. And I just love all the canning tools and accessories that come from ForJars. I love their jar opener. It makes it so easy to get the lids off and it doesn't damage them, so I can use them for other storage methods. It's one of my favorite tools. It has saved me a lot of broken fingernails over the years from trying to not pry up my jar lids off the jars with my fingernails. But I also love that they have a great pressure canner. It's solid, it's dependable, it's built to last, all the things that you need. And right now, you can get a special discount at 4Jars just for being a Homesteading Family follower. So use the code Homesteading Family 10 for 10% off your first order at 4Jars. We'll put the link in the description for you. So make sure you use that coupon code. And thank you, 4Jars. We appreciate you supporting the Pantry Chat. Okay, so let's jump in to the main topic, and that is preserving your summer herbs in oil or in vinegar. Now, first of all, why would you want to preserve your herbs in oil or in vinegar? One, because it's a great way to get all of the benefits of those herbs and the flavor of those herbs into something that is storable for the long term. Now, that is a great thing because some herbs like basil, they just don't hold on to their flavor well. So it's great to go ahead and get them into a form where you can get that fresh basil flavor without actually having the basil. And that's where your olive oil, or I mean, that's where your oil, your vinegar comes in. These methods are also really friendly. They're beginner friendly, they're kid friendly. Kids can take care of this project at home. They are a great way to go. And they make for a lot of flavor punch really quickly. I think you'll be amazed at how much flavor you can infuse into things like vinegars to use for salad dressings or for finishing meals or for making sauces. It is absolutely amazing. And these make for amazing gifts. So if you're looking for some good gifts for this winter, this is a great way to go. Now, let's talk about the safety of herbs in oil. First of all, oil and water don't mix. You don't want to have any water mixed into your oil because that can harbor bacteria. And as soon as you start harboring bacteria submerged in something like oil, you end up with an anaerobic state. And some bacteria, when it's kept in an anaerobic state, can become highly, highly toxic to humans, the most famous of which is the botulism bacteria. When you get that botulism toxin that's created in an anaerobic state, like in submerged in oil, that's when you have a, potentially fatal situation. So, when I'm talking about herbs and oil, why am I talking about water? That's because fresh herbs right out of your garden have water content in them. So if you take basil right out of the garden, right out of the grocery store, that fresh basil right out of the farmer's market, and you pour oil over them, you are creating an environment where you have moisture or you have that water content being completely submerged in oil. Now, the chances of you having botulism in there are pretty low. However, why would you take the risk? It's just totally not worth it. So, according to the National Center for Home Food Preservation here in the United States, if you want to make an herbal oil and you want it to be at all shelf stable, you absolutely have to use dried herbs. You just have to. They have to be completely dry. So, if you wanna use your fresh herbs and put your fresh herbs up, then there's a really easy other method, and that's instead of using oil, go ahead and use vinegar. Especially if you're gonna turn it all into a salad dressing anyways, you're probably gonna mix vinegar in. Vinegar creates an acidic environment that's so acidic that bacteria cannot survive in it. So it makes it completely safe for you to take your fresh herbs and to pour vinegar over it as long as it's at least 5% vinegar. And that would be very normal for any of your cooking vinegars. So red wine vinegar, white wine vinegar, distilled white vinegar, apple cider vinegar, any of those, you pour that right over your herbs and you let those herbs sit, and those herbs just give off all of their good flavors right on into that vinegar. And it makes for an incredibly safe and incredibly delicious way to get that fresh herb flavor into your winter salads without having to go to the grocery store and buy fresh herbs in those little clamshells. So this is a really great way to go. It's super safe and it's something that I totally recommend. Now, doing this is really, really simple. It's as simple as I just said. is you literally go gather your fresh herbs, chop them up, put them in a jar, put them in a bottle, whatever it is you want, and pour that fresh vinegar over it to completely cover them. And then you're gonna wanna let that sit for about 3 weeks to really get all that great flavor out. At which point, you can strain out the herbs and bottle that vinegar, especially if you're trying to make something look fancy. Those spent herbs are going to look a little wilty, a little not great. So, if you're trying to make maybe gifts, then you'll definitely want to strain that out. At that point, you can put a pretty herb, a fresh herb in there, something like a little sprig of rosemary, something that's, a woodier, stronger herb that's not going to break down as fast will stay pretty in that bottle as a display herb in that bottle, and it'll be really nice. So you can definitely get that in there and make beautiful little bottles of vinegars. Now, get creative. You do not have to just use herbs for this. Think of mixing in some of your summer fruits. What about a blackberry sage vinegar? Maybe a lemon with a little bit of lavender would be great. You can come up with so many different combinations. Don't be afraid to add kitchen spices as well. Vinegars are very, very safe to work with. You can completely mix and match dry and fresh herbs when you're working with vinegars, or you can use completely dry herbs if that's what you have on hand and you want to make, say, an Italian seasoning vinegar. You can go ahead and do that. Just go ahead and add some herbs in there. You don't have to measure. This does not have to be exact. Pour that vinegar over it, and it's the exact same process. Let it sit for a few weeks and then strain it out and bottle it up. If you'd like to make a flavored oil, you can do that too. You just need to make sure that you use only dried herbs. So you're going to use completely dry herbs, and something that's really important that's come out in the literature over the years, don't mix garlic into it. Garlic poses a few of its own threats when it's mixed into oil. So you can make any mixture of dried herbs and spices minus any garlic into an herbal oil that will sit on its shelf for a short period of time. Herbal oils, it's best to use them up within about a month. And even with that, it's recommended usually that we go ahead and keep them in the refrigerator. Now, if I'm going to be honest, I don't know anybody who does that because a refrigerated oil is a pain to work with because it gets hard. But make sure you're using all dry and good quality oil, and you should be fine for about a month out on the shelf. If you want to make a fresh herb oil, you can do that, but you need to treat it pretty much like you would treat leftovers of your lasagna. Eat it up, keep it in the refrigerator, and eat it up within about 3 to 4 days. Now, the process for all of them is the exact same. You put your herbs in there and you let that oil soak, okay? The longer it soaks in those herbs, the stronger the flavor is going to be. Now, there's a little bit of a challenge with that, though, if we're talking about using fresh herbs and needing to use it within 3 or 4 days. Obviously, you won't be able to steep your herbs for 3 weeks if you have to use it within 3 or 4 days. So, the trick to that is gentle heat. Put your oil and your herbs into a gentle water bath or double boiler and gently heat them for about half an hour. Then strain them out, bottle them, and stick it into the refrigerator and use it within about 3 days. Now, this is a great method when you're making something, say, like chili oil from fresh chilies. It is amazingly delicious. You can even put some herbs in there to spice it up a little bit. But again, make sure if you're using fresh chilies, which might have that water content in them, that to be safe, you use the heat method. Then you strain them off and then you keep it in the fridge and use it within a couple days. Okay, you guys, my best recommendation for all of this, if you are a beginner, is to start with herbal vinegars. They're just so easy, they're so simple, and they are so safe. They add so much flavor to everything you're doing. I think you're going to absolutely love them. Have a great summer, and we'll see you back here next week. Goodbye.